Hi, Gina.
Hey, how you doing, Angela?
I'm
Nice to talk to you
good.
again.
Yes. We're very cross-cultural because you're in, where are you?
I'm in
In,
Toronto, Canada, Ontario, and yep, this is where I am. And I was born in Italy, so I came here at the age of 9. So, and Toronto is a mixture of every culture you can think of in here. It's like we have all different kinds of races and different cultures and different religions and different beliefs, and it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting place to live. Yeah.
and where in Italy did you grow up?
So I was born in Foggia, which is the province of Puglia. Puglia is like where the
Oh,
heel
yeah.
is. Yeah, I was close to Bari, so well, maybe an hour drive. I don't know, and also close to the Adriatic Ocean, which was nice. I used to go to the Adriatic Ocean, and my mom was from
Oh,
Sicily, so close to
that's
Messina.
right.
Yeah, so we used to go visit my nonno there, and I'm telling you, I mean, you're talking multicultural relationships. We're talking about Italy as you go from the north down to the south, down to the island. It's like your multicultural relationships. Yeah, you just it's like so like different. The northern people are more, they have factories they go to work at, and they're more. Um, it's like Canadians. They go to work, they pay their mortgages, and then as you move closer to the south, you're looking at more farmers, people that have land, people that have animals, people that grow grapes, right, and more family business, families running, helping the parents and then as you move to Sicily, I mean, you have Sicily is a blend of, and you came from Sicily, but my
That's, I
nonno,
was going to talk about not just
right?
cross-cultural, but that
My
multiple
nonno,
cultural, multiple,
yeah,
multiple.
multiple, right? I mean, my nonno Matteo, my mom's father, he was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, right? And then and I don't, I mean, I know him. He's the only grandfather I know, but my nonna, his wife, which was I think 3 or 4 years older, I've never met her. My namesake, Georgina. And in the pictures I see, she's only got white hair, so I don't know what. But I know that when I used to go visit my nonna, I mean, you see these people that have the blonde hair and blue eyes, and then you see the people that have like really, really dark olive complexions with the curly, curly, dark hair and black eyes. And it's like, and the temperaments were the same, like, or very calm and relaxed. It was kind of living in a multicultural place just in Sicily. It was interesting. It was
So
interesting.
we're going to share on cross-cultural love, which even is happening before our period today that you're just sharing
Yeah.
now in Sicily and Italy, and how it could be a solution to conflict in the world. Just make love, everybody, with the different cultures. That's
Right.
how they used to do it. It was a little bit more
Make love,
aggressive
not
in
war.
some
Remember
countries.
was it the
Yeah,
60s? Make love, not war, and the flower child and all the flowers, and it was all about love. Yes, yes, that's interesting.
yeah. So I'm in Sydney, Australia. I was born here, and when I came into Australia, there were a lot of cultures here. However, I was born in 71. So since then, we've had more cultures coming to Australia. And I don't know what the statistics are now, but Sydney must be one of the most multiple cultural modern cities of the modern first world. I think there's another city in Europe that's one of the most multiple cultural cities. I forgot which one in Romania or somewhere. I'm mixing up that country in Europe, if anyone can let us know. And Toronto as well is one of the cities that has most of the different countries, modern countries of the world as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
quite
So
interesting. Yes,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I
yeah,
met you, G, it was 12 years ago. I was in Toronto, and
more.
I met you
No,
2007. That's right.
yes. My God, almost 2007. Wow, 18, 19, 21, 22. Oh my goodness. So like, yeah, 15, 16 years ago. It feels like I met you. I've known you all my life. I feel like I've known you for
Yes.
20 years. Yes.
Yeah.
Was it 2007 when you were in Toronto? Okay. You came back. Did you come back in Toronto? Because I met Louise in 2008.
So that's when I came. I can't remember if I came in 2008, but I came in 2010. And
Okay.
that's when I started to see all these different cultures in your actual
Right.
area. I
Right.
remember there was a lot
Brampton
of,
was a very busy culture.
Yeah, there was like
Yes,
Indian, like East Indian. There were was there people
Jamaicans,
from Jamaicans? Were there other
Barbados,
Caribbean?
Caribbean,
Barbados. Yeah,
Asians, Italians, Portuguese. Oh my goodness, like very, very diverse. Yeah.
yeah. So many of the recent immigrations have come to Toronto, to Australia. I think other countries have had waves of immigrations throughout modern history recently.
Mhm.
But if you think about Sicily, I just wanted to touch on Sicily. I think one of my obsessions with cross-cultural relationships comes from Sicily because it became a playground of a lot of wars, and a battleground, but a playground as well. So there was a lot of, in the midst of thousands of years of wars, there was also a lot of cross cultural exchange in
Yes.
Sicily.
Right.
So if you go there, you'll see architecture that has Arabic and
Yes.
European influences that you won't find anywhere else.
No.
And you'll see the Greek and the Roman interweaving in a way that you won't see anywhere else. And then you'll
Hmm.
see um, some of the more ancient Sicilian stuff that is connected to the Mediterranean history that you won't see anywhere else. And it's all interlayered and it's quite paganistic and quite um, interesting culturally. Plus, they also weave that into the church. So if you go to the north of Italy, the church and how it represents religion's quite different to some of the pagan festivals of the south. I think south of
Right.
Rome, they have a lot of pagan
Rome.
type festivals that are more ancient. So yeah, Sicily is an
Yes.
interesting cross-cultural experiment, and that's why, for
Experiment.
me, because I was born of Sicilian family in Australia, I was always thinking, "What's wrong with me?" When I could have been thinking, "What's right?" Because it was a
Right.
cross-cultural
Yeah.
uh, chaos that
Right.
created Sicily and made it
Like,
quite interesting and unique.
yes. Yes. And that's, I mean, that's where pretty well I learned. I mean, there was a mixture of back then. I mean, as I was growing up, there was a mixture in Sicily. And more so, I saw it in Sicily because I go visit my grandfather every year, and we spend 2 weeks there, right? And so I would just sit back and watch everybody around me. So, because he was a builder, and he built most of the town that we were living in, and further out, and then his boys built some more. So, like he owned a construction company. So just to see the people how they interacted and the different, so more like the Norwegian, like the ones with the blonde hair and blue eyes, that they were like, hundreds of years ago, the Norwegians came down, what do you call them? And they invaded and they brought all their blonde hair and blue eye kind of people over and they mixed interrace. And you have people coming from Africa and they come, like, so you have all these kind of mixed interracial, and it's in the DNA. It's been there like going on for like hundreds of years, and to
Yeah,
see how the small island has got so much um, different perspectives and different mindsets, and it's kind of interesting. You kind of sit back and you watch everything going on, and then of course, while I was there, I always heard of some kind of a killing happening because of mafia related. So it's like
yeah,
it's like, oh, I don't know. As a child, I found it quite intriguing to go visit my nonno because not only did he spoil me, but just seeing what was going on around me was really interesting. So yeah, and of course, if you go to Rome, it's the same thing. I mean, in Rome, they have a pyramid in Rome. Like, I mean, they've got the churches, they've got the Pope, but then if you as you drive around, you see there's the catacombs, and the pyramids. So like the people there are also very mixed, but there's more Italians. Like that feel of Italian is really strong there, right? Yeah. So I mean, as we were talking before, I mean, my first relationship was to an Italian man. I was very young. I met this person. I got married very young, and same culture, same religion, same background, but I just think I was very young and naive and didn't understand the concept. So maybe if I was mature when I met him, if I was 20 instead of being 14 when I met him, or 15,
yeah,
or 21 or 22 and had gone to college or whatever, I would have looked at him and thought, nah, not interested, right? But you know what I'm saying? Only because multicultural relationships are interesting, if you are in it at a more mature level and you've experienced some things in life. I mean, my second husband, he was born in Canada, was Canadian, very quiet, easygoing, mellow kind of guy, and just cherished the ground I walked on. But his parents, his father came from England, London, and his mom came came when she was 2 years old from I think Ukraine, and they were so different, the two of them, but they both loved to garden. But you could see that the old-fashioned way of doing relationships where they only talked about the important things. There wasn't that communication, that touching, that needy feely thing, because back then, way long time ago, people were not raised to do that, right? So I saw how they brought that on to their children, and Art was the oldest of three boys that they had, and he didn't know what it was like to when he met me, he was so happy because finally he met a woman that, I mean, I'm just, me, I'm kind of feely, touchy, and blah. I say it like it is, and sometimes I told him to filter what I was saying, so I still have trouble sometimes filtering, but I spoke what I felt, and for him that was so amazing because he never had anybody express to him things like that. But church, I mean, he was not. It's not that he was a non-believer, but they didn't go to church. But Paul was a
So were
believer. He
his
was.
parents, you're saying culturally, one was from England and one was Ukraine, and his
Mhm.
parents were not physically intimate with each other as much, or they were
I think
expressing, how did
I
they
really think it
express
was the era at that time. I mean, this we're talking Second World
the
War.
general culture of the time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was.
The post-World War?
Uh, yes, just after or during or just after, and there was a lack of jobs and life was really hard. And I mean, my mother-in-law,
Hard.
she had a child and she didn't know what to, when she had Art. She didn't know she had to breastfeed him every so many hours. She'd just be busy working in the. She
Oh,
didn't know that, and the poor
right.
little guy never got the love that he needed to get from his mom, right? So I mean, you're talking about multiculturals, and you're talking about also a lot of things come into it because here's this man that when I met, he was 11 years older than me, but he goes, "Oh my God, Gene, I've never had anybody love me like you do," like like which means I expressed my emotions, right? I mean, I would hug him, and that's what I do. I like to hug. To me, that's important, right? And I told him that I loved him and did different things with him, and we were having, and it was a nice kind of get together. And I mean, whenever he didn't like dancing, but he would come just to make me happy, and he would dance, right? He wasn't a
Good on
believer,
him.
right? Yeah, he didn't really believe about religion. He wasn't into religion. He wasn't raised that way. I think even though they were baptized Roman Catholic. So whenever there was a family like in a communion or something happening, and we go to church, he would come and he would follow whatever everybody was doing, whatever. Like he didn't feel. So I mean, it wasn't a multicultural thing with him. What it was well, the multicultural thing was my mother moved in with us, and my mother was a very tough Sicilian woman, and her and I we loved each other dearly, but we also used to like lock horns because she would say thing and I'd say whatever, and he always assumed because we spoke in Italian that we were yelling at each other all the time. Like his
Oh,
parents,
I
he
forget
came from a
about
very
that.
right? He came from a
Yeah.
very quiet household. The parents slept in
Yeah.
different rooms, and I mean, when I first
Yeah.
met the parents, I thought like, why are they sleeping in separate rooms? And I mean, here I am doing the same thing today because it's like I don't want to be. It took me a
Yeah.
while
I
to get
like a
used to it,
separate room. That's
but I
nice.
prefer it, right? I
Yeah.
prefer it because I get up at night, I can't sleep, I walk around. So, but I didn't understand it back then. Again, see, the mindset was why, and so when I
But
saw that,
isn't that fascinating? You saw something in a previous part of your life that now you're actually doing. It was from a
doing,
different cultural
yeah,
conditioning,
right.
but and you're at the time you're like, "Why?" And then 20 years later you're doing it and you're like, it's actually planting a seed that later you're thinking, "Yeah, that's a great idea. That sounds fine." It's preparing you for this time in your life where that conditioning
It's kind of
sounds
interesting
normal.
because I mean the relationship I'm in right now, again multicultural. I mean I've had lots of multicultural relationships, but the person I'm with now, I mean Luis, he's a very light sleeper, and for many years when he would come over and visit me on the weekends, at the house I lived at in Brampton, I didn't know until I moved in with him that he would come to visit me and he wouldn't sleep. He would have to wait for me to fall asleep and then for me to relax. Because when I fall asleep, apparently I breathe heavy in the beginning, and it would take him 2 to 3 hours to fall asleep. and then he would have to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know that until I moved in with him, and he says, "Well, we're gonna have separate rooms because I cannot handle the noise. I cannot handle any movement. I'll wake up." And I thought, "How come you never told me all the sleepless, hours?" Because I didn't want to tell you. So, so here's another person. Is it multicultural? I don't know. Are all Venezuelans like that? I don't think so. I think he's one of the unique ones. He always says he's special. Um, he has a mindset where he was raised as a Venezuelan. Was I think he was baptized as a Roman Catholic. Probably went to church when he was young, but he doesn't want to go to church. He doesn't. Something happened, so he doesn't go to church with me. As a multicultural, I think that's a personal thing. The ways of doing things are different. I mean, they don't. He doesn't really celebrate Christmas a lot and Easter, but then he doesn't have a big family. I came from a family that was a little bit bigger, and then the family I was married into, my first husband, they had like 11 kids. So there was always a big gathering happening, right? So I got used to that. And now it's
Yeah.
kind of quiet. So I had to get used to being in the quiet. I mean, I had to get used to thinking, okay, so he's not, and he doesn't like to entertain a whole lot, like very rarely, where Paula was always entertaining and Art to say, whatever you want to do. So I used to entertain because I was used to it, right? So there's been a lot of, is it multicultural? I don't know. It could be, or is it unique? I don't know. What do you think?
I think in the beginning, when I was there in 2010, there was a few cultural differences that were complicating the communication. And then when you started to learn how to talk about your feelings, there was a lot of, oh, okay, it's just how you grew up, which there are some people that say cross-cultural relationships are too difficult. However, I've found cross-cultural relationships are everywhere in our history, and they were always meant to be a resource. So you're not going to marry your same blood unless you're in Sicily, and that
Yeah.
ended up being genetically dangerous for some of us. Um,
Yes.
so they did too much of that in Sicily, and that's why a lot of Italians leave, because it's just the same gene pool is not biologically safe for you.
Right.
But also, after a while, you just need to get other input into
Right.
your bloodline. From the
Yeah.
soul point of view as well, your soul might say, okay, I've learnt what I had to learn from that culture, and now I need to experience another culture. And cross cultural relationships can be like what I saw in the beginning with you and Louise. There was conflict, and you both grew from that because you had to learn through
Well,
conflict. Yeah.
it took a while.
But you had
Yeah.
to learn, and you were choosing to
Yes.
learn through
Yeah.
that, not understanding, not liking things about the way the conditioning was. And even though he was like putting up with the sleeping for a while, at some point he says, okay, now I can ask for something else. But he felt
Right.
confident to ask, or a part of him felt able to be safe in that relationship, or he wanted to be in the relationship, so he was able to say, well, how do we make this work? So for me, cross-cultural relationships are about that conversation. How do we make this work? Because you're driving me crazy. I think I had that in my family too. Like, eventually, I think with family it's a bit different from a romantic relationship. I think with family you sort of go, you drive me nuts and I hate you, or I love you, or I love you and I hate you. So I have to work out how to accept myself and you, but I don't need to see you. But a romantic relationship is different because you're seeing that person more, and you're sharing yourself in a way that you wouldn't share with the family member.
Yeah.
So it's
It's
quite different.
also it's also interesting that with the different multicultural, I mean, um, it teaches us how to. It teaches us. I mean, whenever whoever we are with, that person is supposed to be like a mirror of us, right? So if they're
Yes.
coming from a different culture and they're bringing their own unique gifts, and we bring our own unique gifts, and you blend them together, then it's like, okay, so I'm gonna pick up this thing that I like, and this thing, well, whatever, and this we're gonna talk about, and we're gonna, so it's teaches human beings about different cultures and how to interact. Um, it doesn't always work, but I also believe that age has a lot to do with it. Like, I mean, I think that the more mature some people get, the more they realize, okay, do I want to connect because I want to have a peace and I want to be in a happy place, or where when somebody is young, they say, okay, I want to, it becomes more of a passionate sexual. There's a whole bunch of sexuality involved, and there's a whole bunch of different things involved. Not that there's no sex as you get older, there is, but it's not so like, oh, like, um, but it becomes more as a young person, like you're looking at, oh, we're going to get married, or we're going to have kids, and how we're going to raise our children, and there's a lot more involved. Um, but like I said, even in the same, I mean, my three children are from my first husband, and I used to go to church always alone because he would say, yeah, yeah, go and you pray for me, right? So, right? I mean, so same
I think
culture,
that's
but
Mediterranean culture. It's
the
like, oh yeah, the woman, she can pray for me, yeah.
right, yeah, but which I wasn't
It's
liking
definitely
it,
not
so
Jewish. It's not Jewish, but I think
no.
in some Mediterranean, because it's a Mediterranean conversation. My dad was
I
similar. He just said,
was
"It's
he?
like, yeah, you do that Sunday thing. I'll stay here." Yeah.
In my case, so my parents, my father was the one I used to go every Sunday. My mom
Oh, and your mum
every
didn't.
Sunday, and my mom didn't. My mom, when we came to Canada, we worked. She worked, and she would use that as an excuse that her weekend was the time for her to. I mean, I cleaned the house, but she did laundry all the time, and she would stitch or she would sew, and she used to do a lot of hand sewn items for the family. When we first came to Canada in 1968, I mean, I was 9 years old, and my mom would sew things for me herself and for my father, and she would take this. She would find material in a big box where she worked. I mean, they used to get where she worked a big box of material that would be sent in to use as to wash the hand, whatever, just to clean, right? Because she worked in a company where she used to help make step ladders, aluminum. So there were always a lot of dirt. There was a lot of grease and stuff like that. And she would go through the box, and find the best things like dresses and whatever, and bring them home. And she could make an old she would actually could take an actual suit, a man's suit, and she would turn it inside out and make it look new. That's how good she was. So she did a lot of sewing, my mom. A lot of, I mean, her and my sister made both my wedding dresses, right? So it's like, it was just amazing. So she would spend a lot of time doing that. So the weekend was spent on doing that. And she needed to rest because her job was very hard. And also, I mean, we're talking about starting from the spring, like around the end of May, June in Canada. My father had a big backyard, huge, right? Because he used to love, in Italy, he always had like a land he would work on his own and grow. We used to grow a lot of vegetables and stuff. And so her time was spent on weekends making sauce. I know they would pick all these bushels, or maybe 1 or 2 bushels a weekend. Every weekend we'll be doing sauce or canning or boiling stuff and putting in the freezer like string beans. And there's always something to be done on the weekend. So dad would go to church first mass, come back, and then mom would already be busy. So she would go to the main occasions like Easter and Christmas, right? But no, my father was the one. And my father found a little booklet that would it was a daily as he was walking, they found a booklet that for 365 days they had like a reading from from the Bible, an explanation what it was about. And and from that he picked up on that. He read that every day, and he left it for me. Actually, when he passed away, he left me that booklet. And then he actually ended up buying a Bible and would read a Bible. So he was very devoted, and he truly had strong faith. you know um, he knew that he wasn't perfect. He knew that he wished he wasn't drinking, because whenever he drank, so even though my father was from where I was born, like, this Puglia, my mom was from Sicily, these two came together, and my father wanted to be loved more and cuddled, but yet my mother was more like nah, 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 like, and she always, and of course, because their beginnings was a tough one, she stayed tough the whole relationship with my dad. And I remember being in Canada, and I was, like 10, 11 years old, and they would get into big fights. And because now she's working and she's making money and she's got a car. Not that she was an independent woman, would leave him behind to do shopping together and all that. But he, in his mind, would think, okay, look, she's better than me. She's making more money. What if she finds herself a boyfriend? So he would get drinking,
Oh.
and he would become angry, and I would see them fighting. Like, and then she would say, if it was a different time, I would divorce you. Like, so these things happened. It's like I'm looking at it, it's like, oh my God, like I couldn't believe it. Like, a couple of times they called the kids over. So these are the same cultures, right? I don't know, people we're an odd breed. We're trying to be human. People are trying to be human. And it's always hard because it's good to connect with different cultures because we learn and we interact. But without proper communication skills, which is really hard. I mean, just now I see um, our children and our grandchildren today. Not all of them, but like like my daughter, she tries her best to talk to her kids to make them understand, that daddy's upset today, and but mom and dad still love each other. It's gonna be okay. But in this moment, we're just having this argument, and it's okay. People in relationships do that, right? So, and he's Portuguese and she's Canadian, but from Italian parents, right? And um, he was born in Portugal, actually, Armandino. And when he came here, it's I don't know, like he's always got this. He's high edge all the time. He's like on edge, right? It's always, and it gets tiring after a while. And so sometimes the kids see it, but now the kids have gotten used to it, so they know how to deal with it. And if they have to walk away, they walk away, right? So different cultures, I don't know, is it a cultural thing, learning, or is it just a human thing? Is it just a human condition trying to learn to live with each other, no matter where culture we come from, or is it that
That's a
I mean,
very important thing to explore. I feel there's I've heard so many couples have trauma because of what you were explaining earlier. You might be more touchy-feely, yet the other partner might be more reserved, or you might be a screamer. Or when I express anger, I grew up with Italian, so I just go rah. And
right,
I've had people just go, oh, don't you do that? You're a terrible person. And they just think you're the worst. And I'm thinking, that's just how you talk, isn't it? Um, and I think there's been judgment and condemnation within couples because they look at the way that the person communicates or doesn't communicate, or uses their body or doesn't use their body, or screams. Or this one's really interesting, the passive aggressive.
yeah,
So you have a lot of cultures where you're not allowed to express anger, and so they just do passive aggressiveness,
right,
which is
yeah,
avoidance. This is
yeah,
a good one. People who just watch TV or on their phone, they're just, now that's a cultural habit, but actually it's sometimes a passive aggressive way of ignoring you.
oh
And
yeah,
I've seen couples do that before the
yeah,
phone was invented. It could be a book or a newspaper. In the old days, in the 1950s, the husband would read the newspaper and the wife would be dying and she's just desperate for some attention. But the husband had the habit of reading the newspaper. So that was a way that um, culturally the couple was suffocated. And I think that's the issue with the cross cultural relationships. It's just that lack of awareness of, oh, okay, that's how you were brought up and that's how your religion is or that's how your culture is. And in some ways, there's this expectation that you should just automatically understand how
yeah,
to to understand me.
right.
I remember when I was younger, I had this thing where I thought, don't you understand what I need in my
I know.
romantic relationships? I was insulted. I was like, oh, you're so heartless. You don't understand me. It's like, no, they don't understand you because they didn't grow up with you. And there was an expectation I also had for my family that they should understand me. They just didn't. So I had to learn how to communicate what I needed, which was the biggest gift I could have. The biggest gift I could have was people not understanding me. So I had to learn how to communicate what I needed. And I think that for me, that's what cross cultural relationships are. They are friction, a misunderstanding, and then you're forced to find a way to find relationship. It may go through a few battles and problems, but because you're deciding to be together, you find a way. In Indigenous Australia, they also have many different tribes, and they've, for thousands and thousands of years, managed to resolve conflict. They did intermarriage and they had problems in the marriages, but they saw those problems in the marriages between different mobs or different tribes. I'm probably getting the language wrong, but they saw that as a way to say, how do we resolve? How do we come together? And as a civilization, they didn't have war. They had sometimes arguments, but they didn't have war. So they got something
Mm-hmm.
right. They used the cross cultural relationships across intermarriages as a way to find a way. And it didn't go smoothly. There was lots of um, arguments, I guess, sometimes. And then there was lots of celebration as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was migration too, because Australia's a very, very big land. So they had different people come in, and that migration happened over hundreds of years.
Right.
So that was through cross cultural marriages, and
Right.
that was an amazing creation, actually, through
Yes.
marriage of culture. So for me, cross cultural marriage or relationships is actually birthing our culture all the time. We're creating culture all the time. It's just that sometimes we get over we have these expectations like you should understand my culture. You should know, you should do this, and we miss the gift of having cross-cultural miscommunication. I used to call it world, because in the 90s there was all this world fusion through music and dance parties, and I used to have this joke about, let's call it world confusion, because sometimes in the multicultural work I was doing through dance or theatre or just creative projects, you just get to these barriers where you think this is confusion. Have these fights in rehearsals, or we'd have these problems in our personal relationships. We had couples that were having intimate relationships that wasn't successful, or the drama. Sometimes we had shows that didn't go ahead.
Because of
The
that.
drama before the show
Mm-hmm.
didn't, when the show was on, that's the show was still happening. The actual build up to the show was actually necessary in a way for us to learn about ourselves or to learn how to
Right.
be together. And it wasn't going to be pretty or neat or kind. Even sometimes it was unkind sometimes.
Yes.
So maybe cross-cultural relationships need to learn how to deal with, if there is unkindness, how to move beyond that. I think you and
Mm-hmm.
I are pretty much, that's our whole lives, how to how to go from unkindness to some
And that's
sense
been
of
cross cultural. So it's like I think it's just called the human behavior. That's what I think it is. I mean, definitely, if you come from a country that their whole way of doing things, like if you're coming from Australia, from one of those, you said those different, like small, um,
tribes
different,
or
yeah,
areas.
tribe, and then you're going to like Toronto in a big city, then and then you're meeting a person from Toronto, like that would be difficult because I mean that's a huge difference in culture, right? But that's the same as just being human. I mean, like the thing is, the idea is if we could just talk with each other with love and understanding and non-judgmental, I believe that we could try to overcome anything. But it's so hard sometimes to because you think so in my mind you thought that people says don't I know don't no don't you know what I think what in my mind was everybody's like me. I thought that everybody was like me.
Ah,
And when I see
yeah.
people behave like lying, it's like, why are you lying? I don't get, like, I would never do that. Like, I thought, why are you doing that? That's not, that doesn't make sense. So for me, that was a really tough lesson because, I mean, I wasn't allowed to date. And the first person I met was the husband I married. I met him at 14 and married at 17. So I didn't have a chance to really grow up and understand what it was all about. And then I had my first child I had like when I was 18 and my second and 19. It's like, I became a wife and a mother and a business owner like all within a year of whatever and then a house owner, owned a home and I didn't understand communication. I didn't understand like and it was all about whatever he did was right because that wasn't the way I was brought up to believe. That's what I was taught in my Italian culture was that he's always right and we gotta put up and we gotta shut up and we gotta take it right and their understanding is which is kind of weird because his parents I mean they had He had altogether, I was thinking there was 13 siblings, and his parents had a farm, a big farm in Italy, and his father was a smaller man, and his mom was a big woman, right? Yeah, um, and I can't even picture because he was always so. When I met my father-in-law, ex-father-in-law, he was always a very quiet, emotional person. Like he would sit there, and if something would hurt him, he would cry, which was like.
Ah,
And here's my mother-in-law, this 6 foot tall woman. Like he was probably 5'11", she was 6 foot as they were older, right? And she was always bossing everybody around and telling everybody what to do and putting him in his place. And so I don't know if this came as they got later on in their as they got older. I don't know what it was like when they were young. The same thing with my mother. My mother, she met. I mean, my mother eloped from Sicily to where my father lived, and so the first few years of her marriage, she was not treated properly. Right, there was a lot of abuse, from his family, from him, and so she had to put up and shut up because if she didn't, he beat her. Right, but when we came to Canada, right, and she got a job, and he would get upset. She would be quiet in the moment, but then she wouldn't talk to him for a week, and she would tell him. She would tell him how she felt about him. She goes, "That's not nice what you're doing. What you have no," and they would fight about that, right? So she finally had a voice. So we were raised not to have a voice. So is that a multicultural thing? It was back in Italy, back in my day. My sister also didn't have a voice, and I remember the pain that she used to endure with her husband. And a lot of women I knew that around my era when I got married, there were. I mean, I got married young, but my sister-in-law saw that. And we didn't have a voice. That was a cultural thing, right? But then if you go to, I don't know, if you go to, I mean, I wasn't allowed to go out. I mean, nothing as you marry, you're supposed to be a virgin when you get married. That was the thing.
that's right. Yeah.
That was the thing. But that was the thing in Italy when I was growing up. When we left Italy and came to Canada at the age of 9, I went back when I was 15. When my nonno died, I was 16. My cousins were acting like they were going wild. And I'm thinking like, oh my God. And they would make fun of me, go, "You're supposed to be in Canada? We're the Canadians. We're liberated. You're not. You're still like under your parents' thumb, right?" Because they'd be going out every night. They would be sneaking. And one of my cousins, second cousins, was hiding cigarettes. He was like, he was 10 years old, smoking. I was like, I was so confused. So it's the cultural thing that my parents had. If I'd stayed in Italy, I would have been brought up differently. I would have been brought up with my cousins, more freedom, more independence, because my parents were living in a country that they were comfortable in, and they would allow me to go because then everybody would tell them, "What's wrong with you? Let her, whatever," right? But because we came to Canada and they brought that with them, right, when we came here, then they brought that old-fashioned way of raising me, and I felt like I was a nun locked in my parents' house every summer from school. I wasn't allowed to go
Yeah.
out, right?
Yeah.
So it was definitely a cultural thing, and I think, and because I met him too young, I hadn't found out what Gina was all about.
Yeah.
And then you get married at 17, and you have kids at 18. And you're running a business at the age of 18, and you're buying a house when you're like 19 and a half, and you still don't know what it's all about. And your husband's coming and going whenever he pleases. He's self-employed, and I'm stuck at home raising my kids, and I made the best of it, right? Was that a cultural thing? We were supposed to have gotten along. We both came from the same place, right?
Yeah. And it was
But
the
it didn't
cultural
happen.
conditioning of that time and your
Yeah,
family, even
yeah.
though part of the culture in Italy was moving on. I have a very similar thing in my family in Sicily. And when my sister went back to Sicily, they told her, "Oh, yeah, your family was very, very traditional." And they had all
Wow.
gone wild. And
Yes.
meanwhile, our family and parts of our family still in Sicily were time warp. So the ones in
Okay.
Sydney were very traditional, but parts of the ones in Sicily were
We're
literally
crazy.
still very
Yes.
traditional because that was
Okay.
just my mum's side. So the other people in the surrounding areas and village they were more liberal. But my
Yeah.
family that was still in Sicily was still very traditional. And I have even on my father's side, I have members of family that were very, very devoted to the church and
Yeah.
didn't get married and were
Oh,
very,
okay.
very traditional. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I'm not quite like that. And so, yeah, my sister and I were born into a very traditional family, but we were both very unusual. And that was
Mm-hmm.
an interesting conflict for us because it meant we had to really embrace what that meant. If you are
Yes.
born the black sheep in the family, it's actually very common, and I think that's part of the culture itself manifesting a new aspect of itself. So, for
Right.
example, if you have a bacteria, it creates other bacteria, then the bacteria
Right.
then
It
evolves into
evolves like
something
COVID,
else.
right? Yeah.
It cultivates, it's a
Right.
culture. It
Right.
cultivates. Well,
Right.
COVID's a virus, but bacteria was before viruses. And I think there were viruses when bacteria was around, but bacteria were the seeds of life on Earth
Mm-hmm.
to what we know today. And there were other life forms as well. But a family itself will cultivate a black sheep naturally because it's the
Yeah.
culture actually trying to understand itself from a different point of view. That's
Right.
my perspective. And one thing today that's slightly different because what you're sharing about the Italian immigrants of post World War One and Two to other countries, they tried to retain their culture by enforcing it with boundaries.
Yes.
What's blown that up differently today is that we've got this global culture going on, and we've got kids born of those second and third generation immigrants now. And we were saying earlier before we recorded the live how there are so many kids now with their mutts from, like, even in Toronto and Sydney, there's generations of kids being born now that are mutts from parents from East and West and Middle
Different
East and
backgrounds.
everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
integrating
Right.
and having kids. And it's quite common here. You'll see different cultures, the children of parents from different parts of the world intermarrying, and and the next generation has a global social media that shows them everybody's got a different face or a different culture. So I think
Yeah.
that's the main difference now. You can have immigrants leaving, but the parents can't control in the same way our parents
Yeah.
were trying
Controlled
to
us. Yeah.
enforce.
Like I had to marry an Italian. There was no two ways
That's
about it.
right.
I couldn't go to
Yeah.
university. I had to get married. It's like
Ah,
it was just a very, and of course I was the kind of person, because I was so naive. I felt I had to do what my parents told me. Right? I had to, right? Because I wasn't a rebel. If I had been a rebel, I would tell them whatever. I'm going to university whether you guys like it or not. I'm going to get myself a. I couldn't get a part-time job. There was a bakery living from me across the street. I could have gone from work, gone there, worked for 2 hours every day, and made some money. My mother says, no, you have to go to school, you get good grades, and then you get married. That was the rule.
yeah.
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 Anyways,
And even like your mum, she, in order to marry, she ran away, she eloped.
elope. Yeah.
So I've got friends that ran away in Australia because that's all they could do. They had to run away because the culture was so traditional after World War II, and they tried to transplant it here, and it just wasn't what they couldn't handle it. So they just ran
Right.
away.
Yeah.
And I hid everything from my family until they weren't around anymore. So I went, oh, okay, I don't have to hide that. But we used to do everything in secret. And I know people from my dad's generation that did a lot in secret in Australia as well, because the,
Yeah.
the community wasn't allowed to see if you were
No.
having a life that wasn't of that culture. So there is a new choice now for the next generation about how they can understand culture because they're not fighting. Like we were fighting against our family's culture to be our own
Our own
version.
person. Yeah.
Yeah,
To be ourselves. We were fighting because we're trying to find out who we were in this very post-war difficult world. What arose after World War II was a different confusion. Things were not right, and it took our parents a long time to get, at least my parents and everybody I knew in Italy, a long time to get settled with a job and with a house and finally have food home. I used to hear my oldest brother say, "No, he go to sleep at night sometimes with no food on the table." Right? So it was a tough time, and they had to come out. It's like coming out of the ashes and rebuilding yourself, right? And along with that came a lot of fears, right? A lot of, oh my goodness, like we gotta take care of this, we gotta do this and that, and so to allow us the freedom to be ourselves, They did. My mom didn't know who she was. She didn't understand who she was. She finally got who she was when she finally moved in with me after 10 years after she came back to Canada. My father passed away, and she was still sobbing and sad and depressed. I said, "No, as I'm going to take you to church, I'm going to sign you up for bingo." As mom, as you can have fun. It's okay. I said, one day you go see dad again. And she fought me tooth and nail until I brought her. I signed her up, and she fought me until she realized the third time she went, I like this. And then she became a social butterfly. She finally found out who she was. I- until she didn't know until she was in her 60s,
Wow.
right? And how sad is that sometimes, right? I mean, we don't know who we are. I mean, I'm finally beginning to finally understand myself a little bit now, and it's I mean, but I felt like I had to please everybody for the longest time, and I took it personal. And my brothers told me that I'm this ugly person, and you're the devil incarnate, and you're fucking be whatever. I stole money from my mom. It's like they used to say, and I used to get angry, and I used to get agitated and traumatized and cry and sad. And I realized that's just them being whatever they need to be. Like, why am I even taking it on? But this took years. Like I think the onion is finally being peeled all the way to the core, and it's like, okay, I'm not peeling anymore. This onion has been peeled, and I want to be happy. If whoever doesn't like me, whatever. It's not my problem, right? But it's and I have to repeat that because going as I get older, and I find that because of all the different, I mean, I tried being married to an Italian, it didn't work. I was married to a Canadian. He was an amazing guy, but my family didn't. My family tormented him, so he left. And then it was just a matter of trying to find myself, and I thought I had to find myself through others. I thought it
Yeah.
wasn't. And then my daughter kept telling me, "Mom, do you?" And I didn't know what she meant. I said, "What do you mean, do me?" Well, love yourself. Well, don't I love myself? No, Mom, you need to love yourself. And I'm saying that today to one of my sister-in-laws. You know what? You've taken care of everybody all your life, and nobody's here for you now. Just be selfish. And I told her, I know you don't understand what I'm saying because all your life you have been in service mode. You've been a servant and you have not been appreciated or acknowledged. But now, love you and just say, you know what? I don't like you and I don't have to be nice to you anymore. And it's okay. But so it's kind of, and she was in relationships with Italian men, very harsh Italian men. Like all these people that have issues and trauma, like it's a multicultural. I think the cross cultural love is good because it teaches us, like for example, my kids. I mean, my firstborn, his children. Like it's nice to see them because there's a mixture of Italian, Irish and Scottish, and you can see how they kind of intermingle, and they like one of them is very open and whatever talkative and easygoing and likes to jump around and then the other one is very quiet and like reserved, but he's kind of funny too. And then my little girl, my granddaughter, she's just beautiful. She's very tall for her age. She's got these long legs. She does Irish dancing, and she's got this mixed hair of. She has strawberry blonde hair. It's so gorgeous, right? And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking like, how amazing is that? That they get to learn what it's like to be, to understand Italian culture, Scottish and Irish. And even though these are
Yeah.
all European, they're different. But at the end of it all, they all like to have fun. They all like to they all get angry. They all get, and they all they have temperaments, right? So it's funny because they've been brought up and raised in this and they see it and I see it in them. So they're more open to cross culture when they meet their own partners, and
Right.
understanding
And
how
more.
we're going to make,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
understanding how we're going to make it work and what's it going to be like because this is what they grew up with. So the idea of cross culture is good. Was it good for my parents and us? It was tough because it was new, right? But as the world is more open to like social media and I mean Facebook and the Instagram and TikTok and all the stuff, and as we travel around the world more, everybody, we're gonna meet people that I mean you go on an app, a woman goes on an app and she meets a guy that's in Australia. I mean, you might have Kim France, right? And here you were
Yeah.
like in the States and then you lived in Australia. I mean, you traveled, right? So that traveling allowed you to meet different people from different nationalities. And it gave you also a choice of, okay, I like him because this is what I like about this because it's quirkiness. I mean, Luis, I mean, easygoing, quirkiness kind of way about him that's really sweet and cute. And even though he wasn't a touchy feely person, he's okay with it. He learned to be okay with it. So he picked that up from me, and and I picked up from him that he's just kind of open to it, and there's a receptive way and of us going back and forth on that. But that took years to understand, right? It took years to understand. Um, would I have been able to do that with my first husband? No, he would have never understood me because he's got, and I mean, the difference between him and I is like we're like 7 years apart. So I mean, it makes him closer to 70, but still, like he would have never understood me personally. I don't know how he is in relationship with this lady he's been with for the last so many years. Maybe with her he had to learn that I need to understand because I can't always act behave in a manner that's negative to women, or else I'm going to be alone, right? So also, I think
Okay.
that's what happens as we get older too, right? So it's just not the cross cultural thing; it's age. As we get older, we choose to do I want to be with a partner and find out, okay, how am I going to make this work, or
How
am
am
I
I
just
going to
going to
make this work?
how am
Or
I
I'm
going to
going to
make
be
this
alone.
work?
Yeah.
Right? Because the worst thing, and people say, yeah, be independent. People love to say, I'm independent. I hear so many from so many different people. Yeah, no, I want to have my own. But we're not born to be independent. We're born to be with somebody. And as you get older and you hit the 60s, then you retire 65 and 70, you realize how bad it is to be alone. Just having
Mm.
that other person in the house, just someone to say, hey, how are you? Kiss, kiss, good night, whatever. Just that alone, it just knowing there's somebody there in the event that you fall, in the event that you have, I don't know, a heart attack, whatever it could be. In the event that one of you gets sick and you can't get up and you can't go anywhere. Like, when you're young, it's different, right? You have the energy, but as we get older, the body truly, and I mean, there's a lot of commercials that say, no, no, it's not an age thing, but it is. The body
It
changes, the
is.
body shifts, right? And as we get older, we find we have less energy, even though I mean, I've started walking again. I have the energy, but last night I was falling asleep at 7:30. I went to bed at 9, woke up this morning at 1:30. I've been awake ever since because I get my first 3 hours of sleep in. And then it's like, but I cannot stay awake at night because I'm tired, right? The energy. Or before, remember when you came and I mean, I used to be up
Yes.
all night, right? We could go out, we could dance all night away, and then go home, sleep for 2 hours, up again and running again, right? It's like, where's Superwoman? Superwoman is gone, right?
Yeah.
Um, right?
It's
Superwoman is
also,
gone.
um, you were saying before we did the live about that different focus. So you get to a certain age where you want peace, or
Yes.
you don't want the drama, or
Yeah.
you're looking for something different because
Yeah.
when you're younger, you're interested in passion or conflict because
Having
it's
a family
exciting,
and all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
something stimulating, or something that's going to make you feel like you're important. And by the end, you're like, I don't care about being important anymore. I just want to experience something that I don't know what I want, but I know I'm missing something. And I think that's the
Hmm.
missing bit when you, especially 60, you get to this thing where you go, something's missing. I've been doing, and I need to do this other thing before I finally leave this body. So definitely age has an impact on
Yes.
your perception about how are you going to make the relationship work.
Right.
Um, but I would like to just say that conflict is like definitely being born of a different ethnicity in Australia made me the person I am today. And
Mm.
I can't imagine myself without it. So I'm not saying that I loved every second of it. It was very painful when I was young, similar to your experience about feeling oppressed and forced. But I actually feel like that diamond that's in the rough, kind of having to chisel myself out of that rock and find the facets and go, wow, okay, now I see
Right.
things so many
Look
different
at
points of
me.
view.
I'm
Yeah,
beautiful in and
yeah.
out. And if you don't like me, that's your problem, not mine. This is the mirror looking in back at you saying, nah, I don't want it. Don't like, yeah, I just, I just want peace. And you know how nice it is to just kind of sometimes, I mean, because of his job, Luis will go and he's actually a crossing guard right now. It's his last job for the last year before he retires. And he'll go there. And sometimes in the winter when it's cold, he'll come home and he'll lie down in bed to warm up. And I'll just go sit down or lie down next to him just to talk, or just to hang out. It's so nice. Like it's like a different, like I can't even explain. And because I'm so at peace, I fall asleep. Right? Yeah. It's just to hang out, just to be there, just to physically be
Yeah.
there. It's peaceful, and I don't know. I think a lot of women feel the same. I mean, I know my sister-in-law, Carmen's wife, when he was in the hospital for the last 3 months, and she'd go visit him as much as she could because it was COVID. And every time she left, every time she would leave, she says that he would say, "I love you." Just a little piece of "I love you." You know, it's something to enjoy when you're at a place that you know that you're coming. I was reading something today where it's a poem on Facebook about this person that she said in her 60s, and she goes, "I just realized I'm looking at I have left less time than what I've lived."
Hmm.
Right? I mean, when you're 60, you're thinking, God, I mean, when you're 40, yeah, no problem. 50, no problem. You hit close to 60, then you hit closer to 65, think, okay, I'm going to retire soon. It's like, now what do I do with myself all day long? And like, oh my God. And this hurts and that hurts. And then you realize, wow, like, how long have I got to live? I mean, I could have 20 years, 30 years, but I could also have 1 year or 1 month, right? And so understanding that we are here and then we're gone gives us a sense of really getting what are we all about and what do I really want that makes me happy in my last few years of my life, which could be anywhere between, like I said, I mean, my mom was 89 when she died, my father was 62. So, like, I mean, we can go anytime. I
Pick a
mean,
number.
pick a number, right? We don't know
We
where we're
can
going. I
pick a
mean,
number.
we don't know,
A
right? I
bingo.
mean, right? Right? I mean, you've experienced a close call to that too, and you don't know what life. So why is it so important to fight about things that really don't matter? Like, who cares?
Next month, I'm going to explore teenage love because sometimes I think that fighting thing comes from that period of life, like when you went into an early marriage, um, where you think you have to do something for this reason that doesn't, it's not very clear. It comes from this primal force,
Right? Yeah.
and you just go with it. And I think that 60, that it's called teenage love next month. That's the theme. And I'm looking at it because I think the problem that a lot of younger kids face today is that they have inherited a couple of generations post the world wars that decided to immigrate and then held on tightly to some beliefs that were somewhat outdated but also somewhat created a structure, a safe structure to immigrate with. But now all of those rules have kind of gone out the window and there's no rules.
Yeah.
And the next generation are faced with choosing, making choices that our civilization never had to before in a way that's not anchored in anything and can only really be anchored in what we were forced to do, which was to try to find this, our heart, to find who we are. And
Mm-hmm.
they're not given those guidelines. So teenage love is something I think is very passionate and thoughtless and kind as it can
Okay.
be
I mean,
sometimes.
I see my grandson. I mean, he's got this girlfriend, and they're so cute together. He's 18. They're 18, and I think they've known each other for maybe 2 years, and just happy. He's going to one school, she's going to another. Like, there's none of this, like, oh my God. And no, just happy. They like to spend when they spend time together. They're in a good place, and when they're apart, they understand. And I thought that's the way it should be. And that comes also from learning communication from parents, right? I mean, if there's a strong family togetherness. I mean, my son, and he's got his father-in-law was and mother-in-law, amazing people, amazing. But his father-in-law was a good role model of a father and husband, right? So my son learned that from him. And he was really good with the grandkids. So the grandchildren saw that, especially the boys, they saw what a real honorable man looks like and how he behaves. So these are things that, see, the foundation is what helps us to find out who we are and what we need to know, right? Does it always work? Not 100%. But if we have a strong foundation, a family that's close, a family that's close knit, and they help and support each other, not judgmentally and not with enforcing people to do things and controlling, but with a way of openness and allowing communications and discussions and allowing people to find out what they're really all about and exploring what they want to know and do. That is what builds a stronger family model, right? So I've seen that, and it's like it's really nice to see that. It's really a nice feeling. That's something that I didn't have, and it's probably something that you didn't have growing up. If we had that, would I? I mean, even to this day, I still. Feel, I mean, my brothers are still like totally. I don't know what to call it. I don't want. I don't want to say it live, but they're like, I have no family. I have no family, Angela. When I call you sister, it's because to me you are like my sister. Like my sister's been gone now for like what 15 years. I don't know. And she was my best friend, but I got to know her after I got married because we were like 9 years apart, right? So I didn't have any I had best friends when I was growing up, but I wasn't allowed to have that relationship with a lady, with the girls, because I had to go home and I was in enclosure, enclosed, right? So did I know who Gina was? No. Would I have reacted differently to life if I'd known? Possibly. Would I have been a different person if I was able to go to university and become a chartered accountant because it's like something I wanted to do? Definitely. I mean, but can I go back and change it? No. So do I want to at this stage in my life think back and think, oh my God, what I could have, I should have? No, because it's done. You cannot have regrets. You just have to look at your life and realize, okay. I did regret for a long time though, right? I mean, this was my
Yeah,
process. You know,
that was part of it. Yeah.
that was my
Yeah.
process. And I finally realized I don't want to argue with me anymore. And it's me I argue with. Because when I'm yelling at you, it's because I'm yelling at me first. In my
That's
mind,
right.
I'm yelling at me, right? So I'm taking it out on you, but it's not about you. It's about me, right? It's always about me. When somebody's looking at me and they're saying, you're not a good person, my brother told me I'm the devil incarnate. It's not about me. It's how he sees himself. But he doesn't have the courage to look at himself in the mirror and say, you're not good. So he's got to blame it on me because people need to look at somebody else, right? So it took me a lot of time, a lot of years to realize that, and I don't care what they think about me because if they think I'm shit, then they probably are themselves, and they just don't want to. They don't want to admit it to themselves. If they think they're good, that's because that's who they are. They're good, right? If I'm yelling at you, it's because I'm yelling at me. So this took a lot of years to put together. And if I could
Yeah.
teach that to my grandchild today, can you imagine
Yeah.
the understanding? I mean, like
Yeah.
you're teaching your family, like you're a young lady in your family, and you're talking to her and you're explaining things to her. I mean, my grandson picked me to be his sponsor because he says, no, no, you're the only person I know that believes, has faith, and you love God and you go to church. And I know if I come to you regarding anything about God and Jesus, you will answer me and you'll answer me from your heart, right? So, I mean, this
Wow,
is
that's
these
a
are
very
things.
beautiful thing he said. That's
Really? I mean,
beautiful.
a 13-year-old little boy, right? Because the mother guides them. The mother guides them and talks to them. Because the mother went through a hard time growing up. She didn't know who she was. It didn't take her as long as it took me, right? And then she's a very wise woman. So she's teaching her children to have that kind of a mindset younger. Because if at a
Mm.
younger age you can learn to comprehend what you are all about, then you know what to look for in others if you're looking. And or to just be you, right? And if you're meeting a person that's cross cultural, I mean, if Johnny meets a woman that or a man, whatever, I don't know. I'm assuming it's girls. He likes girls, right? And if he meets a girl that she's like from Australia, I mean, that's amazing. This little boy, he's Portuguese. He's got this curly, dark. He's got this big curl, dark hair with brown eyes, and he's like really handsome. My guy's gonna be a heartbreaker when when he's like a 20-year-old boy. But he has an
I think we
understanding.
said that when he was 5. I think, yeah.
Can you imagine? He was so, I mean,
Yeah.
adorable. He was so
Yeah. He
cute.
was so
And now the
cute.
hair, right? The hair, like it's like, and to me, it looks like a soccer player. But anyways, um, but he's got this thing about him that he understands. Does he have moments that he's being a little, you know what? Yes, definitely. He's a teenager. He's right. But he'll sit down. My mom will sit down with him and she'll talk to him. My mother never sat down and talked to me. I wasn't explained anything. But it's because she didn't know. How could she teach me when she doesn't know? How could
Yeah.
my sister teach me anything, my older sister, when she didn't know, when she struggled with a relationship that was, a husband that was 16 years older? How could she have taught me anything? The one thing she taught me, she goes, Gina, don't marry anybody that's a lot older than you because one day you'll regret it. And I looked and I thought, oh, okay. I didn't know where she was coming from. Not that she didn't love her husband, but it makes it harder, when you're with a man that's, like 15 years and older than you, right? Because you still want to keep going, 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 and maybe the learning just kind of slow down a bit. So, I mean, these are all things that we learn as we get older, and we teach to our children. Okay, I think I've
Thank you,
said enough.
Gina.
Yeah,
Okay. So, if
yeah,
anyone's watching and they're interested in discovering more on how to survive and thrive, or how to just love cross culturally, give us a message. Connect to
yeah.
us. Let us know if you've
Let
been.
us know.
I had a book idea from the 90s that I called "In Search of a Husband in 127 different countries," and it was going to be a compilation of different love relationships from different cultures. But now we've got people who are more than one country. So I think the book is a bit old actually, because you all the cultures have evolved and it's changing as we watch them day to day. So maybe you're in a cross cultural relationship and you can share your funny cross cultural stories
Yes, that'd be
with
fun.
it. Thanks, Gina.
Thank you, Angela. Appreciate it. Always nice to talk to you. And it'd be nice to hear from anybody else with their ideas that they have about this topic or anything else they want to talk about. Like you said, we're here. We would love to listen to you, and no judgment, with our open heart. And that's what I'd like to do. Yeah, you take care.